Imagine dedicating literally years of your life to staring at reams of continuous green-banded printer paper.
Just endless stacks of it.
Right. You are sitting in this small, cramped room, and your entire job is to look for a sign of alien life in just an absolute sea of numerical static.
Day after day, year after year, and you are just seeing background noise.
Yeah, nothing but static. But then, in the summer of 1977, a volunteer's red pen stops dead on this sequence of 6 characters, a sequence that proved, just for a fleeting moment, that we actually might not be alone.
It's an incredible moment in history.
It really is. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening up a massive stack of astronomical data, historical archives, and surprisingly, epidemiological reports to explore what might just be the most tantalizing maybe in the history of human existence.
We're looking at a 72-second anomaly that briefly broke the cosmic silence.
Exactly, the wow signal. But the wildest part of this deep dive isn't just the signal we caught from the stars. It is what was happening right here on the ground at the exact same time.
Because in that exact same year, 1977, humanity was quietly achieving our greatest concrete triumph. We were wiping a biological monster off the face of the Earth.
It is such a profound contrast, right? Because on one hand, you have humanity facing outward, straining against the absolute limits of our perception and getting a mystery that we literally still cannot solve.
And simultaneously, you have humanity facing inward, taking total control of our environment and achieving this unprecedented definitive victory that actually required the cooperation of the entire human race.
I am so ready to unpack this with you because, for most of human history, we have basically just been shouting into the dark.
Yes.
We ask, are we alone? And we get back nothing but the quiet, empty hiss of the universe.
And it's important to note, the sources for today's deep dive are grounded entirely in the actual physics and history of that search. We really aren't here to spin science fiction for you today.
Right. No little green men today.
Yeah, exactly. This exploration is about calibrated scientific humility. It's a look at the rigorous and honestly often frustrating reality of what happens when the universe gives us a single astonishing glimpse of something extraordinary.
And then just goes stubbornly, entirely quiet.
Precisely.
It is the ultimate cliffhanger. But, before we even get to the signal itself, I realized looking at these sources that my mental image of searching for aliens was just completely wrong.
How so?
Well, you don't just walk outside, cup your hand to your ear, and hear another civilization, right? Moving from the philosophical question of, are we alone, to the physical science of actually listening requires a massive leap.
It's a huge logistical problem.
Yeah, and our research traces that leap back to a very specific moment in 1959.
Right, so that would be 2 physicists at Cornell University, Giuseppe Cocconi and Philip Morrison. They published a paper in Nature that year that essentially laid the intellectual groundwork for the modern search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, as we call it today. Yeah. They took a highly logical approach to what is, honestly, an almost impossible problem, because the universe is unimaginably vast, and the electromagnetic spectrum, the different frequencies of light and radio waves, it's practically infinite.
It's a huge dial.
Exactly. So if an advanced civilization were trying to communicate across the galaxy, they wouldn't just pick a random radio frequency.
Right, because space is insanely noisy. You've got exploding stars, you've got pulsars spinning like tops, quasars, the leftover radiation from the Big Bang.
It is an absolute cacophony of radio waves out there.
Yeah, so if I want to be heard over a loud crowd at a party, I don't just whisper at random pitches, right?
Yeah.
But how do you even begin to guess what frequency an alien species would use? We have zero shared culture.
Well, you look for the one thing you both definitely share, which is the fundamental laws of physics.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cocconi and Morrison argued that an advanced civilization would logically use a frequency that any other scientifically capable civilization would naturally tune into, and they pointed to the hydrogen atom.
Hydrogen? Because it's everywhere.
Exactly. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It is the basic building block of the cosmos. It makes up about 75% of all normal matter.
So, okay, hydrogen is everywhere, but how does an element give you a radio frequency? Because I always think of hydrogen as a gas, not a radio station.
It comes down to its subatomic structure. A neutral hydrogen atom consists of 1 proton and 1 electron.
Right.
And occasionally the spin of that electron flips. Yeah. When it flips from a higher energy state to a lower energy state, it emits a photon.
Oh, a particle of light.
Right. But that photon specifically takes the form of a radio wave with a very specific unchanging frequency, 1420 megahertz.
1420 megahertz.
Yes, and because hydrogen is just so ubiquitous, this 1420 megahertz signal is a constant background hum in the universe. Any civilization that studies basic astronomy or physics would know about this specific frequency. It is basically nature's own broadcasting standard.
So it's kind of like trying to find a friend in a massive, crowded, unfamiliar city back before cell phones existed.
That's a good way to look at it.
You can't just wander the streets randomly hoping you bump into them. You go to the most obvious landmark, right? Like maybe the clock at the central train station.
Because it's the logical place you both know exists.
Exactly. You sit under that clock and you wait, hoping they had the exact same thought. So the 1420 megahertz frequency, which astronomers call the hydrogen line, is essentially the universe's central train station clock.
Precisely. So armed with this logic, scientists realized they didn't need to search the entire infinite dial of the radio spectrum. They just needed to build instruments specifically tuned to listen to the hydrogen line.
Which brings us to a field in Delaware, Ohio.
Yes, to an incredible piece of engineering officially named the Ohio State University Radio Observatory.
But affectionately known by everyone as Big Ear.
Big Ear, yeah.
And I saw the photos in our source material, and we really need to emphasize the word big.
It was massive.
Because I was picturing a radar dish, you know, like the ones you see in the movies, tilting up at the sky. But Big Ear looked absolutely nothing like that. We are talking about an instrument the size of 3 football fields.
3 football fields, yes.
And it was entirely flat on the ground.
Right. It was a massive, flat, aluminum-covered ground plane with these huge parabolic reflectors at either end. And you touched on the critical mechanical detail that shapes this entire story.
That it didn't move.
Exactly. Most radio telescopes, like the famous one at Green Bank or the old Arecibo Observatory, could be actively steered or pointed at specific targets. But Big Ear was completely non-steerable. It was physically fixed to the Earth.
Which seems incredibly counterintuitive to me. Like, how do you scan the sky if you can't even point your telescope?
You let the sky come to you. Big Ear functioned as a transit telescope. It listened by staying perfectly still and just letting the rotation of the Earth sweep the sky slowly past its listening beam.
Okay, so it's...
Imagine standing in a dark room holding a flashlight steady while a globe slowly spins in front of you.
The beam of your flashlight traces a line across the surface of the globe.
That is exactly how Big Ear observed the cosmos.
So it basically just sat there, acting like a tripwire.
Yes, a tripwire is a great analogy.
But that means you have absolutely no control over what you're looking at or when you're looking at it. It demands a level of patience that is almost hard to fathom today.
It really was a grueling vigil.
Because we are so used to AI instantly flagging anomalies on a glowing monitor for us. But this was the 1970s. The data output from Big Ear wasn't a sleek dashboard. It was a continuous feed of computer paper.
Reams and reams of continuous fanfold paper printing out columns of characters 24 hours a day.
Just a wall of paper.
And volunteers, many of them students or just amateur astronomers, had to sit there and sift through that paper entirely by hand.
Looking for a needle in a cosmic haystack.
They were enduring years of a fruitless search, just staring at columns of numbers that represented the meaningless background static of the universe.
Hoping for a spike.
Hoping for a spike, yes.
Just waiting for that train station clock to ring.
Yeah.
And because the telescope is completely stationary, there is a sheer mechanical necessity for what happens next, right?
Yes.
Because if you are relying on the Earth's rotation to sweep the sky past your telescope, any single fixed point in deep space is only going to be in Big Ear's field of view for a very specific, mathematically predictable amount of time.
Exactly. Because of the specific width of Big Ear's listening beam and the constant speed of the Earth's rotation, a radio source in deep space would enter the edge of the beam, get louder and louder as it reached the dead center of the telescope's focus, and then it would fade out as the Earth kept turning and carried the telescope away.
And what was the time frame on that?
The total window of time for that entire process, from the moment the source entered the beam to the moment it left, was exactly 72 seconds.
72 seconds. Okay, that number is the key to everything today, because that brings us to the night of August 15th, 1977.
Right, and it was a completely unremarkable night. The telescope was actually unstaffed at the time.
Nobody was even there.
No, it was simply doing its job, letting the Earth turn, recording the data automatically onto the line printer paper in the control room. No human was watching the dials when it actually happened.
Which adds this eerie, almost poetic layer to the story for me. The moment humanity has been waiting for since we first looked up at the stars, and no one is even in the room.
It wasn't until days later that a volunteer astronomer named Jerry Ehman was going through the backlog of printouts.
I just imagine him sitting at his kitchen table, scanning this endless sea of ones and twos, and suddenly he stops dead. He spots a sequence of characters that makes him grab a red pen.
The sequence was 6EQUJ5.
6EQUJ5.
And Ehman's reaction has basically become a cornerstone of astronomical lore. He circled that specific sequence in red ink, and in the margin of the computer paper, he wrote a single word. Wow.
The wow signal. Okay, now I have to jump in here and puncture a massive public myth because I know exactly what you are thinking at home when you hear this.
It's a very common misconception.
Yeah, you hear a sequence like 6EQUJ5 and your brain immediately goes to Hollywood. You think it's an alien password or a string of prime numbers or galactic coordinates being beamed directly into our computers to be decoded.
Right, but it is absolutely none of those things. The characters 6EQUJ5 foot contain no hidden message, no decoded language, and no coordinates.
It's a lot simpler than that.
It is purely and simply a visual record of the signal's intensity over time.
It's just a volume meter.
Exactly. The computer program used a specific base 36 alphanumeric system to represent how loud the signal was compared to the normal background noise of space.
Wait, base 36?
Yes, because in the 1970s, computing memory was incredibly limited and expensive. The engineers needed a way to print the volume level of the signal every few seconds, using only a single character space on the paper.
Oh, I see. So if the volume is 1, you print a 1. If it's a 9, you print a 9. But what happens when the volume hits 10? You can't print a 1 in Euro because that takes up 2 character spaces on the line printer.
And that would ruin the formatting of the printout. So if the signal intensity rose above a 9, the computer switched to the alphabet. A represented an intensity of 10, B was 11, C was 12, and so on, all the way up through the alphabet.
Okay, so let's look at that sequence again. 6EQUJ5. But with that code in mind, we are looking at a chronological timeline of volume.
Right. Read it from top to bottom.
So the first measurement is a 6 foot, meaning it's a bit louder than the background static. A few seconds later, the next measurement jumps up to E, which is 14.
It's getting louder.
Then it climbs to Q, which is 26. Then it hits a massive peak at U, which is 30. Then it starts dropping back down to J, which is 19, and finally ends on a 5 before fading back into the static.
It forms a perfect mountain shape.
Yeah, it rose, it peaked, it fell.
And that shape is the crucial insight that made Jerry Ehman write, wow.
Oh.
The letter U represents an intensity roughly 30 times louder than the normal background noise of deep space.
30 times.
That is an incredibly strong transmission. But much more importantly, if you count the characters and the time intervals between them, the entire event lasted exactly 72 seconds.
There's that number again.
Yes. The rise and fall flawlessly matched the geometric shape that a fixed point in deep space would trace as Big Ear's beam swept across it.
Because the Earth is turning.
Exactly.
The signal itself didn't actually turn on and off or gradually get louder and quieter. The signal was a constant beam. The Earth's rotation physically carried the telescope into the beam. It got loudest when the telescope was pointed dead center at it, and then the Earth kept turning and carried the telescope away.
That's precisely it. If the signal had been local, for instance, an airplane flying overhead, or a military radio tower on Earth, or even a satellite in high orbit, it would have moved across the telescope's field of view at its own speed.
Right, it wouldn't match the stars.
Exactly. It would not have perfectly mimicked the exact 72-second transit profile of the background stars. The length and the shape of the signal proved, mechanically, that whatever emitted was out there, in deep space, at a fixed stationary point relative to the stars.
It is staggering to think about the adrenaline Ehman must have felt sitting there, because it wasn't just the 72-second shape that made this incredible, right?
That always wasn't.
According to our sources, the wow signal possessed a whole checklist of specific hallmarks that basically made it the holy grail of astronomical anomalies. It wasn't just loud, it had a very specific texture.
It really checked almost every single box that scientists like Cocconi and Morrison had theorized a decade earlier.
Wow.
First of all, it was narrowband.
Okay, let's break down what narrowband means, because I definitely struggled with this initially.
Sure. So when natural phenomena in the universe emit radio waves like a massive star going supernova, or a pulsar spinning rapidly, or the accretion disk of a black hole, they are messy.
Right.
They blast radio energy across a massive wide spectrum of frequencies all at once. They're broadband, they make noise across the entire dial.
Okay.
But this signal was narrowband. It was a tight, highly specific, highly focused spike on one exact frequency, with virtually nothing spilling over into the surrounding frequencies.
So, if nature is like a chaotic burst of static across your entire car radio dial, engineering is a single, clear, isolated musical note playing purely on 97.1 FM.
That's a perfect analogy. A narrowband signal of this intensity is incredibly rare in nature. In fact, it is considered the definitive signature of an engineered transmission.
Because it's efficient.
Yes. If an intelligence wants to punch a signal through the massive electromagnetic noise of space efficiently, they focus all their transmitter's energy into one tight, narrow band. Spreading the energy outwastes power.
And the specific note it played, 1420 megahertz. It sat perfectly right on the hydrogen line. The exact frequency Cocconi and Morrison predicted.
The central train station clock.
The clock. It was exactly where we expected someone to be.
And furthermore, researchers traced the origin of that 72-second transit to a specific direction in the constellation Sagittarius.
Did they find anything there?
When astronomers looked closely at that exact region of the sky, there were no known stars, no pulsars, no quasars, absolutely no natural objects that could possibly radiate a signal like that.
And I know they scoured the records for terrestrial interference too. Like, was it a secret military broadcast? A weather balloon? A stray reflection off a piece of space junk?
They checked all of that.
But nothing fit. The signal was totally clean. It was incredibly powerful. Everything aligned perfectly with what humanity thought an alien signal should look like. I mean, it feels like the ultimate eureka moment.
It certainly feels that way. But this is where the rigorous and honestly almost painful discipline of the scientific method comes into play.
Here comes the catch.
Yes, because in astronomy, and particularly in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, a single detection, no matter how perfect it looks on paper, is only a candidate. It is never a confirmation.
You need a repeat.
You have to be able to verify. You can't just publish a paper saying we found aliens based on 1 minute of data.
Right.
Falsifiability and repeatability are the absolute bedrock of science. Without a second detection, you cannot run further tests. You cannot confirm the source's exact location, and you cannot study the signal for embedded information.
Which brings us to one of the most perplexing mechanical mysteries of the entire, signal event. A mystery that was actually built right into the physical structure of Big Ear itself.
Yes, the mystery of the feed horns.
The feed horns. Break that down for us.
So Big Ear did not just have one single listening beam. To help verify signals and filter out local Earth interference, the telescope was designed with 2 feed horns side by side.
Okay.
Think of them as 2 ears or 2 eyes, looking at slightly offset patches of the sky. As the Earth turned, a point in deep space would sweep across the first feed horn.
Right.
Then, because of the physical offset between the horns, roughly 3 minutes later, that exact same point in space would sweep across the second feed horn.
So if a signal is a continuous beacon shining from deep space, like a lighthouse shining at Earth, Big Ear should record it twice.
It absolutely should.
The printout should show a 72-second mountain of volume, then a few minutes of quiet background noise, and then a second 72-second mountain as the fucking horn sweeps over it.
That was the mechanical design. But when Jerry Ehman looked at the data, the wah signal appeared powerfully, undeniably, in only one of the feed horns.
And the second word.
When that exact same patch of sky swept over the second feed horn just 3 minutes later, there was absolutely nothing. The intensity stayed at 1 and 2. It completely failed to appear a second time.
The signal had just vanished.
Yeah.
It was there, and then 3 minutes later, it wasn't. Which means whatever was broadcasting either turned off their transmitter immediately after we heard it, or their beam shifted away from us, or, we just don't know.
And this mechanical anomaly, the failure of the second horn to catch the signal, really marks the profound transition in our story. We move from the sheer, astonishing thrill of discovery to the creeping, agonizing realization that the signal might be slipping through our fingers.
Yeah.
The universe spoke clearly, beautifully, and then just as quickly, it withdrew.
And the agonizing part is that it stayed withdrawn. Which brings us to the silence, the second that never came. Because obviously, the moment Ehman realized what he had on that paper, the search was immediately on, right?
Oh, absolutely. Jerry Ehman and his colleagues didn't just file the paper away in a cabinet. They desperately wanted that second detection. Ehman secured time on the telescope and searched the exact same coordinates in Sagittarius in the immediately following days and nights.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It breaks my heart to imagine that, sitting in that control room night after night, watching the printer churn out paper, hoping for the U to appear again, and just getting 1s and 2s, just static.
And the search did not stop in the 1970s. For decades, subsequent astronomers have used vastly more powerful, vastly more sensitive modern radio telescopes. They have pointed arrays from all over the world at that specific patch of Sagittarius, listening for any whisper of a repeat.
But the sky had simply closed back up. We got our 72 seconds and never a single second more. Because it never repeated, it became this open wound in astronomy. And, human nature being what it is, we abhor a vacuum. If we can't definitively prove it was aliens, we try to prove what else it could possibly have been.
It is the duty of science to exhaust every possible natural explanation before defaulting to the extraordinary hypothesis of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right. And over the years, there have been numerous scientific hypotheses trying to explain it away naturally. We already discussed that terrestrial interference was rigorously investigated and ruled out. The 72-second profile was just too perfectly matched to a deep space source.
Yes, that was dismissed early on.
But I've seen headlines over the years claiming the mystery was solved. Like, what about the 2016 comet hypothesis? I remember seeing articles everywhere saying, wow, signal finally explained.
Yes, a researcher proposed a hypothesis in 2016 that two comets, specifically 266 P. Christensen and P. 2008 Y2, were passing through that region of the sky at the exact time.
Okay, comment.
The theory suggested that a massive cloud of neutral hydrogen gas surrounding these comets might have emitted the 1420 megahertz signal as they transited Big Ear's beam.
Now wait, I have to push back here. Comets are essentially giant dirty snowballs, right? They are made of ice and gas, and as they get close to the sun, they outgas massive clouds of hydrogen. Why couldn't it just be a comet? That makes perfect sense to a layman.
It sounds plausible on the surface, yes. But when astrophysicists actually scrutinized the physics, the theory fell apart completely.
Really?
Yes. First, cometary hydrogen clouds simply do not emit radio waves in that specific, highly focused, narrowband manner. They emit broadly and weakly.
Ah, so the note was wrong.
Yes. And second, when astronomers recalculated the orbital mechanics of those specific comets, they found they were not actually in the precise beam path of Big Ear at the required time.
Wait, they weren't even in the crosshairs.
No, they were nearby, but not in the actual beam. And third, even if they had been dead center, comets simply lacked the required energy to produce a signal 30 times louder than the background noise of space. The astronomical community formally dismissed the comet hypothesis after peer review.
Okay, so comets are definitely out. But looking at our sources, there is a very recent reanalysis happening right around 2024 and 2025, which proposes something much more complex, something called a hydrogen line flare.
This is currently the most promising natural explanation that astrophysical science has put forward.
Okay, how does that work?
Researchers have combed through massive amounts of archived data from other observatories, looking for similar, though weaker, events. The hypothesis is that a massive, cold, interstellar cloud of hydrogen gas might have been briefly excited by a tremendously powerful external trigger.
What kind of trigger? Like a star exploding?
Possibly a magnetar flare. A magnetar is a type of neutron star, the crushed, ultra-dense core of a dead star that possesses a magnetic field quadrillions of times stronger than Earth's.
Quadrillions. That's hard to even picture.
It is. And occasionally these magnetars experience starquakes that release unimaginable bursts of radiation. The theory suggests that if a magnetar flared directly behind a cold hydrogen cloud, the cloud's atoms could be stimulated to release their energy all at once.
Okay.
The cloud would act almost like an astrophysical maser, a microwave laser, briefly emitting a highly focused, extremely powerful, narrowband spike of 1420 megahertz radio waves.
A natural space laser. So we are talking about an incredibly rare, perfectly aligned cosmic event. A dead star violently flares behind a gas cloud, and the cloud focuses that energy directly at Earth for just a few minutes, perfectly mimicking an engineered signal.
That is the proposed mechanism, yes. However, we must frame this epistemic state very carefully.
Because it's just a theory.
Exactly. As promising as the hydrogen flare hypothesis is, it explicitly does not close the case. We have never observationally witnessed a natural hydrogen line flare with the sheer intensity and flawlessly focused narrowband profile of the WOW signal. It remains a hypothesis.
So after nearly 50 years, we are still suspended in the maybe.
We have to impartially recognize that reality. The WOW signal is strictly neither proven to be the work of an extraterrestrial intelligence, nor is it definitively explained away by natural phenomena. It occupies a unique, frustrating, and wondrous space in our scientific history.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, is it harder to accept that it was just a random space cloud catching fire in a way we've never observed before or since? Or is it harder to accept that someone out there actually said hello and we completely missed our chance to answer because our telescope was looking the wrong way 3 minutes later?
That is the deep philosophical ache of the wow signal. And that pain of the unrepeated signal, that sense of a missed connection, it leads us directly to the physical reality of what followed.
Right.
Because time did not stand still while we debated the source. The tools, the physical spaces, and the people involved in that 1977 discovery eventually began to fade away.
Let's talk about the physical erasure of this history, because you would think the telescope that detected the most famous astronomical anomaly of the 20th century would be a protected historical monument, a scientific heritage site, but it's not.
No, it isn't. And it is a profound loss for the history of science. Big Ear was demolished in 1998.
Demolished.
The university sold the land to developers. The massive aluminum ground plane, the intricate parabolic reflectors, the control room where the printer sat, all of it was torn down and sold for scrap.
And what did they build there?
The site was paved over and converted into a golf course.
A golf course.
Yeah.
You literally cannot make that up. The place where we might have first touched alien intelligence is now a fairway. The very instrument that sat there, patiently letting the sky wash over it, the machine that actually heard the universe speak.
Yeah.
It is simply gone.
It is gone. And it wasn't just the telescope. Jerry Ehman, the volunteer who spotted the signal, who wrote that iconic red word in the margin, passed away in 2025.
Oh, man.
It is deeply respectful to note how Ehman conducted himself throughout his entire life. He maintained a careful, lifelong scientific dignity.
He never tried to cash in on it.
Never. He never succumbed to the temptation to cash in on the phenomenon. He never wrote a sensationalist book claiming he had decoded an alien message.
He just stuck to the facts.
He always maintained that the signal had the genuine, profound potential to be a message from another intelligence. But he strictly and consistently refused to unscientifically claim that it definitively was. He lived and died with the integrity of the mystery.
He really respected the maybe. And, while it is incredibly easy to look at the demolition of Big Ear and the passing of Jerry Ehman and feel a deep sense of melancholy, this enduring cosmic mystery of 1977 that we just couldn't hold on to, we cannot end the story there.
No, we can't.
Because 1977 is a fulcrum year for humanity.
It is the year that showcases the absolute extremes of our capabilities.
There is a deep irony in the fact that Jerry Ehman is watching a piece of paper in Ohio, entirely powerless to make the universe repeat itself. We were at the mercy of the cosmos, unable to control what was out there.
Sure.
Yet at that exact same moment in 1977, when it came to things happening on Earth, humanity was wielding a level of control we had never achieved before in our entire history. While we were looking out into the dark and finding an unanswerable maybe back here on Earth, humanity was achieving our most concrete, undeniable triumph.
If the signal is a story of our profound limitations, the eradication of smallpox is the ultimate story of our staggering potential.
Yes.
To understand the magnitude of this triumph, we have to lay out the horrifying gravity of what smallpox actually was. Because it was not just a severe disease, it was the oldest, most merciless biological killer in human history.
I think we sometimes lose perspective on just how devastating it was, precisely because it's gone now. It feels like ancient history. But our sources highlight a number that is just hard to comprehend. Smallpox killed an estimated 300 million people in the 20th century alone.
Let that number truly sink in. 300 million people in a single century. That is more deaths than all of the wars of the 20th century combined. World War I, World War II, the influenza pandemic, smallpox, killed more.
That's terrifying.
And it had been doing so for millennia. The variola major virus was a relentless plague. It caused massive fevers, vomiting, and a horrific pervasive rash that covered the entire body in fluid-filled pustules. Even if you survived, which a third of victims did not, it often left you permanently blind or severely disfigured.
So how on earth did we stop it? Because we haven't eradicated anything else like this. We still have malaria, tuberculosis, polio. What were the specific biological mechanics of eradication? Why were we able to beat this specific monster?
Smallpox was uniquely eradicable due to three primary biological factors. First, it is a human-only disease.
Meaning it doesn't live in animals.
Exactly. It does not have an animal reservoir. If a disease can hide in bats or birds or pigs like influenza or COVID-19, it is nearly impossible to wipe out because it can always mutate and jump back to humans.
Yeah.
Smallpox only infected us.
So there was nowhere for it to hide.
Exactly. Second, it was visibly diagnosable. There were no asymptomatic carriers walking around spreading it silently for weeks. If you had smallpox, the severe rash made it immediately obvious.
Which means you could spot it right away.
This meant health workers could quickly identify and isolate cases. And the third factor was that we had an incredibly effective, highly stable vaccine.
Stable in what way?
It was freeze-dried, meaning it did not require a complex, refrigerated cold chain to transport it into remote, sweltering environments. And it was administered with a simple bifurcated needle that literally anyone could be trained to use in 10 minutes.
Okay, so the biology made it possible. But theoretically possible is very different from practically achieved. You still have to coordinate the entire planet. And you can't just vaccinate every single human being on Earth, right? That would be logistically impossible.
Mass vaccination of the entire human population was indeed the original plan, but it failed.
Oh, it did?
Yes. In developing nations with vast, remote, rural populations, trying to reach 100% coverage was practically impossible. The virus kept slipping through the cracks. This is where the strategy had to evolve.
How did they change it?
Under the leadership of D.A. Henderson at the World Health Organization, an epidemiologist named William Foge pioneered a critical, highly targeted strategy known as ring vaccination.
Ring vaccination? How did that actually work in the field?
Instead of trying to blindly vaccinate an entire country, the strategy shifted to intense surveillance and rapid, overwhelming response. Whenever a single case of smallpox was discovered in a village, mobile health teams would rush to that specific location.
And isolate them.
They would isolate the patient. Then they would track down and vaccinate every single person who had been in contact with that patient. Then they would track down and vaccinate everyone who had been in contact with those people.
It's brilliant.
Think of it like fighting a forest fire.
Oh.
You don't try to water the entire forest. You cut a fire break, a ring of cleared brush around the flames. You trap the fire so it has no new fuel to consume.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Ring vaccination built a firewall of immunity around every outbreak, trapping the virus so it had nowhere to spread. The virus would simply burn itself out.
The firebreak analogy perfectly explains why it worked. But executing that required unprecedented global coordination. You had health workers, doctors, and local volunteers traversing mountains, jungles, and active war zones to track down every single rumor of a rash.
It was a massive undertaking.
And what's wild to me is when this was happening, the intensified campaign ran through the 1960s and 70s. Global tensions were at an absolute boiling point.
This is perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the entire endeavor, and we must look at this impartially as historical fact. This global campaign occurred at the absolute height of the Cold War.
Right.
The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in an existential nuclear standoff. They were fighting proxy wars across the globe. Yet they worked together through the WHO to achieve this eradication.
That's the part that gives you chills. While aiming intercontinental ballistic missiles at each other's capitals, their scientists are sitting in rooms in Geneva figuring out how to distribute vaccines.
It was actually a Soviet health official, Viktor Zanov, who formally proposed the resolution to eradicate smallpox at the World Health Assembly in 1958.
Oh, really?
Yes. He passionately argued that humanity possessed the tools to end the disease and had a moral imperative to do so. Throughout the campaign, the Soviet Union supplied immense quantities of the freeze-dried vaccine, hundreds of millions of doses. Meanwhile, the United States provided massive financial funding and vital epidemiological leadership through figures like D.A. Henderson.
Despite their profound political ideologies, they recognized a shared biological enemy that entirely transcended borders. They realized the virus didn't care about capitalism or communism. And this massive, coordinated global effort culminated in the exact same year that Big Ear heard the wow signal.
In October of 1977, just 2 months after Jerry Ehman circled that red wow, on a piece of paper in Ohio, a hospital cook in Merka, Somalia, named Ali Malin, contracted the disease. He had been riding in a vehicle with 2 smallpox patients.
I read about Ali in the sources. He was completely terrified of the needle, so he had avoided getting vaccinated when the health teams came through, right?
He did, and he developed the characteristic fever and the rash. But because of the relentless, exhaustive work of the WHO contact tracers, who immediately threw a massive ring of vaccination around his village and everyone he had interacted with, the virus hit a dead end.
He didn't pass it on.
Ali survived, and the virus did not spread to a single other person.
Ali Malin became the last natural case of variola minor smallpox on Earth. The unbroken chain of transmission that had plagued humanity since the days of the Egyptian pharaohs, that had killed 300 million people in that century alone, finally, definitively broke.
The fire had consumed its last piece of fuel. The World Health Organization spent 2 more years aggressively searching the globe for any hidden cases, and finding none, officially declared the disease eradicated on May 8, 1980. But the final victory, the last moment the virus naturally jumped from one human to another, was in 1977.
What an unbelievable year.
If we synthesize all of this, the emotional and historical distance covered by the events of 1977 is truly staggering.
It really is.
It was the year we strained our ears toward the absolute furthest reaches of the cosmos, hoping for a voice, and received an agonizing, unanswerable maybe, an anomaly we couldn't hold on to, that we couldn't force to repeat.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, it was the year that humanity, despite all of our profound, potentially world-ending political divisions, exerted ultimate control over our own destiny and came together to erase our oldest biological killer for good.
It is the ultimate contrast between our powerlessness in the face of the vast universe and our incredible, almost godlike power when we actually work together down here on the ground.
Well said.
And think about what physical artifacts survive from these two monumental efforts today. Smallpox is gone. Its only remnant is locked in a couple of highly secure freezers. Big Ear is a golf course. Jerry Ehman is gone. The sky in Sagittarius is silent.
There is very little left.
All we have left of that cosmic moment is literally a single strip of continuous computer paper sitting in an archive with a red word scribbled in the margin. That fragile piece of paper might be the most important artifact in the entire history of human existence, proving we aren't alone. Well, or it might be absolutely nothing at all.
It requires us to live with the profound tension of the mystery.
But, thinking back to how Big Ear actually worked, the telescope listened by just letting the sky drift past it, catching that fleeting 72-second window of opportunity.
Right, the flashlight on the globe.
And it makes you wonder if that signal was an engineered message. Maybe it wasn't a one-off burst. Maybe it sweeps across the galaxy exactly like a cosmic lighthouse, projecting a narrow beam that takes centuries or even millennia to complete a single rotation.
A very long transit time.
Yeah. Our failure to hear it again might not mean the universe is empty or that the civilization is gone. It might just mean human attention spans are far too short for cosmic time frames. How many other lighthouses are we missing right now simply because we're blinking at the wrong moment?
That is a deeply provocative thought to carry forward as we continue to look up at the night sky.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the archives. Keep asking questions, keep looking up, and we'll see you next time.